Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RCN Sports Talk, presented by The Morning Call. I'm Chris Michael. We have a great show lined up for you this evening, so let's get right to the introductions of our special guests. Joining Keith Groller, the senior sports writer of The Morning Call, and myself, our special in-studio guest, Al Thompson from Football Stories, the editor-in-chief and amazing reporter for high school, college, the pros for football, and some other investigative reporting that we'll get to in just a few minutes. Al, thank you so much for joining us in studio today. So we go from one story. Baloo received some big attention for some outstanding achievements from their community and for one particular person, which I promised Coach Rogers we wouldn't talk about. But Al, you were in the news too. You kind of created some waves on a national scale recently too about a topic you were on a show a number of years talking about, and that's steroids in wrestling. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and your investigative journalism is just kind of making waves on a national level.
I make a lot of enemies too.
Yeah, I've heard about friends. That too.
And so the Protect Our Youth from Steroids is the name of the effort. I was here in 2014 when we had a resolution passed in Pennsylvania rebuking mainly strongman events like the World's Strongest Man and the Arnold. We've expanded it in 2016 where there are actually 15 organizations that are named by the state of Pennsylvania basically condemning them. Arnold Schwarzenegger is condemned under 5 different names, but it condemns anybody that doesn't have drug testing where it should be. WWE has had a long, horrible history with steroids. They're not named in the Pennsylvania resolution. If we do go to do another one, and I believe we are, they will be named. I got it. I get letters from all over the world, and people ask, giving you tips. Did you know this? Did you know that? And I was told about a guy who has been in Philadelphia a number of times. He's from Tennessee. His name is Glenn Jacobs. He wrestles under the name Kane. He's now 51. He's still enormous, 6'1", 325. And he won an election. He's a mayor now.
Mayor Knox, right?
And so when I kind of got into it, I called both candidates who lost to him. He won the primary against a guy named Brad Anders by 23 votes in the Republican side. And
23 votes, not percentage. It was 23 actual.
Just 23 little votes in a community of 450,000. It's a red state, so the Democrat had a challenge, Linda Haney, 70-year-old lady, lovely woman. I called both of them, and they both said they kicked themselves because they didn't bring up the long history of steroid use in the WWE and all the deaths. And that was he was still wrestling. He wrestled, I think, 2 nights ago.
And you brought it to their attention. That's the amazing thing to me, is that they were running against them and all the resources that are out there.
How about
you were the one that went that
after the election, though. They said, Brad said, I wish I'd met you just for 1 week if I had, and both of them said they knew about it, but they just didn't know how to frame the questions. They didn't know how to bring it up. And because it's just not in their DNA, day to day. And what I did was I talked to both of them. I talked to the people at the USADA, United States Anti-Doping Agency, and I said, I'm going to file a complaint with the Attorney General because of 2 things. One is a conflict of interest because he has been in this steroid environment for 25 years. Doesn't matter if he did steroids or not. He is living in this culture. There is no question that there are drug dealers that he is on tour with, people who use steroids, illicit drugs. It's not even a gray area to talk about. It is so. It has been so rampant. 2009, I think 40% of every wrestler tested positive for roids. And so I said, how is he going to be part of law enforcement if you're an undercover narcotics agent in Knox County, Tennessee? Are you a little edgy right now? This guy has never known anything but this world of steroids. Yeah. Are you comfortable with this? So and also we found out that, and this is like you're getting all these little text messages from people in the campaign on both sides of the aisle saying, well, he got all this money from the WWE, from Linda and Vince McMahon, and cash from wrestlers, but no one ever brought their name. He was allowed to campaign under the name Kane. Well, the name was never registered. So I was going to file a complaint with the ethics people and with the Attorney General about the law enforcement conflict. A local paper there, a big paper there, the Knox News, actually got him an interview. He didn't have any choice but to do the interview. This is like 2 days, 3 days before he was being sworn in. And they asked him about the culture, about bringing it in. I know, Keith, you've done a lot of articles on this subject. And my effort is not to keep bringing people in front of cameras who fail tests. Mine is to go after who's causing this influence. And they asked him about the culture, about this and that. All he would say, and this is now a man who is 24 hours from being sworn in as the mayor of a huge county with 450,000 people living in it, and the only words he had to say were, "I never did steroids, and I don't condone them." That's it. I'm sorry, but if you're the mayor, you're not a Republican, you're not a Democrat anymore. You are an elected official.
Yeah,
your only response is they're illegal, they're incredibly unhealthy, they've killed a lot of people I worked with, scores of people have died.
Yeah, he could have used the platform to just totally debunk
But the
steroids.
WWE literally paid for his election.
That's a problem. Conflict of interest.
So you would think that my experience with this whole thing over these years since 2011 is that the people at the state level were always such a pleasure to work with because there was no special interest. You follow me? When you get to Congress, when you get to the Senate, or House of Representatives, when you get to the Senate, then you get all these people that have been paying for these guys.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything illegal, but they've been paying for their campaigns. So when a subject comes up and there's a conflict with their sponsor, whatever it is dies. And here you have it at the local level. I mean, the local level, and this guy totally turned tail. And on top of that, he's still wrestling. It's insane. And he may be going to Saudi Arabia in November, 2 days before the...
And how much is he making a year as mayor?
$180,000 a year.
And he's in Saudi Arabia.
$180,000 a year he makes. $180,000 a year, and I just see it's outrageous. And that's why the people in the community, and I did get a call. I haven't heard from the Attorney General yet, but I have heard from the, and Knox News printed a big story.
Yeah.
And it went viral all over the world. The WWE News had it on their TV station, WWE News and their websites, and scores of websites all over the world, England, Australia, ran stories on it. Not one of them called me, but I was glad that they did it because it got the conversation started.
Yeah.
And the gentleman who's from Abington, incredibly, moved years ago. His name is Doug Haynes, or Doug Himes, from the Delaware Election Finance Ethics. He called me after he sent me a letter saying he couldn't process my complaint to go over it with me. And he said, "You turned a lot of heads here." He says, "People should have brought this up during the campaign."
Sure.
He probably wouldn't be mayor. So the whole idea of this is, this was kind of low-hanging fruit when I got the email saying, "Why don't you look into this?" And it now has spawned this conversation. When I went out to cover the Eagles-Tennessee game, Thursday and Friday, I stopped at a bunch of politicians' offices and had spirited conversations with them about this. All of them agreed. Yeah. This guy's not the most popular guy in the world out there right now because of, not only has he got this horrible background, the company he worked for, but he's still doing it. Well, on $180,000 a year salary.
Because you guys were talking about this up in the Meadowlands a few weeks
Correct.
ago, right?
That's why Keith and I were talking about it. I sent him some of the stuff I'd done, and I know Keith...
Well, he's a great crusader for it. And again, steroids continues to be a problem. I was just moved maybe 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. The Lyle Alzado story was on, I think, the NFL Network.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, what were you doing to yourself, Lyle? And so many people have just destroyed their lives and the lives of others.
Correct.
With this terrible thing called steroids.
My whole thing is that when kids see Kane in the ring, they aspire to be Kane, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when they start the process, at some point, they realize that the only way I'm going to get into this is if I abuse myself. Yep. And it's abuse. You're abusing yourself. And so let's look at what is going on in Knox County. And now Vince McMahon's answer is not to do any kind of steroid reform. If I have one more little story to tell, he showed that he does not care at all about steroid testing. His Brock Lesnar failed to test for the UFC because they are run by the United States USADA. He failed their test. What he does, he just retires from the UFC, and Vince McMahon has no problem, and his wife Linda have no problem.
He's a huge name, yeah.
Bringing him back into the WWE to wrestle, where according to Forbes magazine, he was the highest paid wrestler in 2017 while under suspension with the USADA. Yeah. Who suspended his suspension, saying, "You're not going to do this." you're going to have to serve the full year.
Yeah.
But he made $12 million, according to Forbes magazine, during 2017, while technically under suspension for doing drugs that could harm him. So he is finally clean, I guess, now. So now we think he made about $18 million because first half of 2018. Now he unretired to the UFC, and according to the USADA, who's not thrilled with this at all, what happened here. That's pretty hokey, don't you think? With the stunt that they pulled, he can fight in the UFC after January 19th.
Do you want to give people people can follow this story that you're uncovering on Facebook and Twitter and so forth? How do people follow
you? You can go to my I have a Facebook page, Protect Our Youth from Steroids, and I now have a Twitter account with a tiny amount of followers. But the people who are following me are like these like millions of followers. I can't believe who are following me on there. So, but it's a problem. And this isn't, again, we have to get away from dragging these athletes in front of a camera and listening for the apology and then just moving on.
Yeah.
We need to start looking at the people who is causing this. IMG with World's Strongest Man, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Vince McMahon, and Linda McMahon. They have gotten...
And then hold people accountable.
Holding them accountable for it, and this is the first time somebody, I think, has really pushed back on them.
All right. Well, thanks for that. We're going to take our first break, and when we come back, Keith and Al have also been busy covering high school, college, and...